Good morning. Since we've reached the 10 o'clock hour, we'll go ahead and get started. And if you will please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming to our July 28th Planning Commission meeting. Our roll call, Kathy.
Mr. Curry is absent. Mr. Sevison?
Present.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Moss? Absent. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Nader?
Here. Okay, thank you, Kathy. And report from Planning Commissioner EJ.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Commission. EJ Valdi with the Planning Services Division. Due to the frequency of our meeting, I have little to report, so I'm just going to stay right here for now. I do want to point out a couple things. First of all, on the agenda, you're going to notice the action agendas from the previous meetings on there. We're going to start a new practice of having that on the agenda, just kind of as a checks and balances to make sure the action agenda is reading accurately from the prior meeting. So that you'll see on your consent agenda. And then upcoming meetings, August 11th, we're going to be right back here in the same place for the Squaw Valley Specific Plan project. And then the August 25th meeting is going to be, we'll be back down in Auburn. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
All right. Any questions for EJ? Okay, thank you, EJ. Appreciate it. Okay, so now is the time for public comment. Anything that's not on our agenda, if you'd like to speak on that, we welcome you to step up. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda. And is there any interest in a motion or removing these items to discuss?
I'd make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Rich.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept. I guess we don't have to do roll call on this, or just take a vote? Do we do it? You want a roll call? Yes, okay. Council says yes. So, Kathy, if you do a roll call?
Mr. Curry is absent. Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Moss is absent. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes. Okay. All right, thank you. Then we will move on to our 10:05. I think it's 10:05, so we can start. Yes, it's 10:05.
Good morning, Commission, and thank you for having me. I'm Crystal Jacobson with Placer County Planning Services Division, and I have been leading the county's efforts to update its community and general plans in the Tahoe Basin area for a number of years now. So we actually have a few presenters for this item today. I'm going to present on the area plan. So this item, first of all, is a Tahoe Basin area plan along with the Tahoe City Lodge project. It's the draft environmental document for both of those items. So with me is Steve Welna, a Tahoe planner, and he's been the project planner on the Tahoe City Lodge project. So I'm going to present on the area plan. He's going to present on the Lodge project. And then also we have Adam Lewandowski from Ascent Environmental, who works with the environmental consulting firm that prepared the environmental document before you today. He's going to present on that. And then finally, we also have the project applicant, Samir Tuma. So he's the applicant for the Tahoe City Lodge project, he has a few slides to discuss with you at the end of the presentation. And then finally, I just want to point out that we have Lucia Maloney here from TRPA, who's available to answer questions if you have any questions pertaining to TRPA. So again, the item before you is to accept comments on the draft environmental document for the Tahoe Basin Area Plan and the Tahoe City Lodge project. The area plan is an update to our land use regulations within the basin only. Again, this has been underway for about 4 years now. The Tahoe City Lodge application, I just want to point out, it's important to note that both projects, the area plan and the Tahoe City Lodge, will have separate actions at the end. So today we're just accepting comments on the environmental document. When we come before your commission again in the future for you to deliberate on those on the project, you'll have two different items before you then. So that said, we're pleased to be here today to accept public comment, and really this is an important milestone for the project, so we're happy to be here. So this is the area plan boundary. I would just point out that it encompasses the entire portion of Placer County in the Basin. However, really the primary focus is on the town centers of Kings Beach and Tahoe City. And so those are actually defined as town centers per the TRPA regional plan. And so those are areas where the regional plan identifies opportunities for environmentally beneficial redevelopment. So really they're trying to concentrate development on the town centers and removing development outside of the town center areas. So the boundary, the plan is intended to realize the community's vision for the North Tahoe region of Placer to assist in achieving and maintaining TRPA's environmental threshold carrying capacities and really implement the regional plan. So that's the intent of the area plan. It does present principles, goals, and policies and implementation strategies to do just that. So it encourages environmentally beneficial redevelopment, walkable, pedestrian-oriented communities, access to recreation and open space opportunities, and then again, just to try to get some environmental improvements in the Basin area. So just by way of background, the regional plan, TRPA regional plan was updated in 2012, and so right around that time is when the county embarked upon an update to our community and general plans in the Basin. We did form 4 citizen advisory groups that we call area plan teams to help inform this process. We also created or embarked upon vision plans. So we had a town center vision plans for Tahoe City and Kings Beach that also helped to inform the area plan. And then in July 2014, a plan was put out on the street along with a notice of preparation for an environmental document. However, that plan was not supported. And at that time, it was very clear that we were on a path that was not leading towards adoption of the plan. And so we really kind of pulled back, retooled the plan, scaled way back on the proposed provisions, and then we released another plan in July 2015 with the notice of preparation for the environmental document that's before you today. So it's been the process in general has been included a very robust public outreach that we believe the outcome is a draft area plan that's really reflective of a broad range of stakeholders and input from them. So again, the plan's kind of evolved over the time. It includes an environmental improvement emphasis, regional plan alignment, and few regulatory changes, focus on regional plan implementation, and again, most of the concentration of redevelopment within the town centers of Tahoe City and Kings Beach, and really retains the existing standards and provisions for land use regulations outside of the town centers. So those really remain in. We're carrying those forward. So in terms of area plan organization, there are 8 chapters of the area plan, as well as an implementing regulation document that you have before you today. I'm not going to walk you through all the details of those, so rather than doing that, I'm just going to focus on the primary policy components that are outlined in the plan and being proposed. So in terms of the area plan programs, again, the key objective is to implement the direction of the regional plan, and the plan does so by first carrying forward the regional plan redevelopment incentives available within town centers. So the regional plan has incentives for folks to actually try to concentrate development and redevelopment in the town centers of Tahoe City and Kings Beach. And so those are really standards related to height and density and land coverage, where you can get increased height and density and land coverage if you're demonstrating environmental improvements. So the area plan uses TRPA standards and findings. It does include some supplemental requirements related to reduced height in certain districts within the town center, which I'll speak to a little bit here in a minute. It also includes site building design standards and standards for pedestrian and bike facilities. There's also an additional lake view enhancement finding. This was in response to input that we received from the area teams about trying to protect view sheds and actually really open up view corridors to the lake on those properties between the highway and the lake. And then also, the area plan is also intended to implement the regional plan through area-wide amendments, substitute standards, and mapping. So I'm going to go into detail on those here with these slides. So the area plan amendments, these were encouraged and required actually through the regional plan, but also very much reflective of the input that we received from the area plan teams. The first is to allow residential uses in commercial areas all commercial areas. So these are the areas outside of the town centers, Homewood, Sunnyside, Carnelian Bay. There's a lot of little communities along the lake there that are not necessarily town centers, but they do allow for commercial uses. And so we heard that folks would like to see residential uses allowed there as well. In addition, we have updated our parking ordinances. So that this was also in response to input that we received from our team, the area plan teams, noting that parking is difficult in the town centers of Tahoe City and Kings Beach because the parcels are very constrained. And so we have updated the ordinances to allow for some flexibility in parking when we're getting things like commitment to transit, and some environmental improvements, things like that. We have allowed for some flexibility. In addition, shared use, allowing for opportunity to share parking. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that from the Tahoe City applicant today with that project, the Tahoe City Lodge project. They're utilizing that standard. We also have some mixed-use site and building design standards that would apply to all commercial areas, not just the town centers. So you'll see those in the area plan document. And then provisions for dark sky lighting, just really to try to maintain the dark sky here in North Lake Tahoe. And then in terms of, these are called substitute standards. So these are standards that are not included in the regional plan, so they're being proposed to substitute the regional plan regulatory provisions. The first is the area plan would expand upon the TRPA land use conversion programs with a limited pilot program for on-site conversions of what's considered commercial floor area to tourist accommodation. So it would be converting CFA to TAUs. And so this would address a land use imbalance. Right now, the county maintains a lot of commercial floor area allowances and allocation, but not a lot of tourist accommodation units. So it would really just allow some flexibility in exchanging those commodities. There are some limits to this. They are limited to town centers only, and then there's a cap on it. So there's a cap of 400. No more than 400 additional TAUs would be established in Placer through the program and other actions combined. And then the conversion rate is consistent with what TRPA is putting together for their bonus unit program. So they had explored the same conversion through their bonus units, and so we're utilizing their conversion rate, which is 1 TAU to 450 square feet of CFA. And then there's some other requirements with that, too. The sites must have BMP certificates, must have sidewalk access, quarter mile to transit, just really, again, demonstrating environmental improvements. The second standard that you'll see here is the non-contiguous project sites in town centers. This would allow and address land use assembly challenges that folks have. So they would allow folks to use two different sites as a project site, so two different parcels maybe on either side of the town center, to count towards their project. Again, parcels are very small in the Tahoe City and Kings Beach, and so this would just provide a little flexibility for folks to actually get redevelopment on the ground. And then there's also a revised level of service standard that is being proposed for the town centers along roadways and intersections. We would be proposing a level of service standard F. Again, this is the reason here is we already have traffic congestion in the town centers, and so it's really recognizing that and trying to focus more on reducing vehicle miles traveled in the Tahoe Basin area. And so you're going to see a lot of focus on reducing VMT in the plan. And then there's also provision for secondary dwelling units in the plan, and this would be to allow them on lots smaller than an acre, where they otherwise are not allowed right now. And so this is really an effort to try to implement the county's housing element, and it's really to address housing affordability in the basin. There are some standards and criteria. This would only be allowed on sites that are within a transit route or in a mixed-use area. The units would have to be deed restricted for residential use only. We have heard from members of the TRPA governing board a desire to actually require that they be deed restricted for affordability too, so we will be exploring that option. So next I'm just going to kind of walk you through the mapping, so in our land use plan. So we are, as I noted earlier, we're carrying forward the existing standards outside of the outside of the town centers of Tahoe City and Kings Beach. So we are really carrying forward the existing plan area statements and the special policies that are related to those. However, what we've done is we've sort of reformatted them into sub-districts with some tables. So, and the reason for that is just to try to provide a more user-friendly kind of approach in the document. In the town centers, we do have sub-districts as well. So the sub-districts are really kind of the zoning districts, if you will. And then we have what we call core and transition areas. And this is really where the core is kind of the center part of the town. Transition are really those gateway areas that you, as you're approaching the town. And so we have different standards for those, mostly related to height, so that as you're coming into town, we have allowances for lower height, with the higher buildings and the more intense land use in the center part of the town. And this is really just to try to help shape, community character and scale of the town centers. We also have what we're calling a Kings Beach Town Center Land Use Classification Cleanup, and there's an exhibit in the EIR. It's Exhibit 5.1 that demonstrates what this is. There are 3 parcels that total 1 acre that in the TRP Regional Plan Land Use Map, they were included in the town center, and the land use classification was mixed use. And so we're proposing that those be zoned mixed use. So you'll see that change as well. And then for all of the lands that have been acquired throughout the basin, not all of them, but most lands that have been acquired throughout the basin for conservation purposes, these are a lot of the CTC lands, those are being rezoned to either conservation or recreation, just to reflect really what the purpose of those lands are. And then we have what we call special planning areas, and I'm going to touch on these more on the next slide, but these are areas, they're overlay districts where supplemental requirements would be required for projects that come forward there. So this is kind of hard to see, but these are the special planning areas in the Kings Beach and North State Line area. We have this new pointer here I'm going to use. So you're going to see one, this is the area, this is called the Kings Beach Entry Special Planning Area, and that's right along kind of where you're coming down on 267. And so the idea there is that we'd like to see that site or that area be more of a gateway into Kings Beach. And so there's some requirements for connectivity, SEZ restoration. There's Griff Creek right there. So really what we'd like to see is a kind of more comprehensive planning in the future if someone's coming in to do some land use work there. And then in addition, we have the North State Line right in here. So So for that site, it basically recognizes existing zoning, but there is a special planning area overlay, which just recognizes that folks that would come in the future for projects could retain or could utilize the redevelopment incentives that are outlined in the regional plan if they met additional environmental improvements. And then there are a few special planning areas over in the Tahoe City area too. The first is actually outside of the center. And I apologize, but it's off this map. But if you're coming up Highway 89 from Alpine, there's a couple of sites that you'll see where there's some commercial uses right along the highway that were actually downzoned in the last update, the last community plan that was made. And they were downzoned to recreation, but they're actually commercial uses on site. And so we've applied a special planning area overlay district on those sites so that the county can embark upon future planning of those and really trying to recognize those existing uses that right now are non-conforming. And then in addition, we've got what we call the Tahoe City River District special planning area and also a Tahoe City Western Gateway. So there's a gateway one right here, and then this is the River District. And really, the idea here is that we wanted to recognize the work that's been going on around the Fanny Bridge. So they're realigning the highway there, and there's a lot of focus on creating a walkable, pedestrian-oriented sort of community in that, and really trying to activate that for recreation. And so that's what that is reflective of. And then same thing here with the Tahoe City Western Gateway, is really to try to plan that in a comprehensive way that really focuses on walkability and environmental restoration. We have one other, let me point it out real quick. We have one other special planning area that I'm going to go in a little more detail on, and that is this one right here, which is the Tahoe City Golf Course. And so I'm going to talk about that real quick. So this is actually the one area. It's a special planning area, but not just that. It's also an area where we're proposing a modification to the town center boundary. So again, the town center boundaries were defined through the regional plan process. So they are on a map, and we're proposing a map amendment. And so what we're proposing is that 7.2 acres be removed from the town center and 4.2 acres be added. So the areas that are being added are around and I have a map here I'll show you in just a minute, but around the clubhouse area of the Tahoe City Golf Course. And then the areas being removed are the areas around, it's owned by the Tahoe City PUD. It's the Fairway Community Center, as well as a county wetland basin area in the Tahoe City. So we're removing really public lands out and then pulling in the golf course piece. And so I'm just going to go straight to that map because it's a little easier. And so so right here, this is where the Fairway Community Center is, and you can see that area is coming out of the town center. The town center boundary is what you see right here in black, this black outline. And then this area right here is the county's wetland basin, and so that would be coming out of the town center. We don't anticipate any development of that site, so we pulled it out. But then right here, this is the golf course. This larger blue thing you see here is part of the golf course, and so is this little piece where the arrow is pointing to. And so that's the clubhouse portion. That's high land capability. So that area is being proposed to come in. And then the blue piece is coming out, and that is being proposed to be rezoned from what it is right now, which is residential, to recreation. But then I want to point out, too, that we have heard from stakeholders a desire to actually deed restrict that land so that only residential uses would be allowed in perpetuity. Well, that's the Tahoe City PUD land. They own that. And so we can't require them to deed restrict that land, but they have agreed to do that. And actually a draft deed restriction has been approved by the PUD. They don't intend to use it for anything other than recreational purposes to serve really their district and serve the public. And so they have agreed to restrict that land so that it's recreation in perpetuity. So you'll see that. And then, so the special planning area that is over this golf course piece right here, the clubhouse piece, really requires that any projects that come in that want to utilize the town center redevelopment incentives that are outlined in the regional plan, they would also have to do some additional improvements. So that's outlined in the plan. And one is a matching SEZ restoration. So they'd have to, for every acre developed, they would have to restore an acre of SEZ. In addition, we'd like to see sidewalk extensions to that site. And so what you'll hear is the Tahoe City Lodge project is actually proposing to develop on a piece of that, or redevelop the golf course. So they're utilizing a portion of that as their project site, not all of it. So there'll be some opportunity in the future for other projects to come in and utilize those incentives if they provide for environmental improvements. And then the plan also includes opportunity sites. So you're going to see those analyzed in your environmental document. One of them is the Tahoe City Lodge. And then the other is the Kings Beach Center, what we call a design concept. So this is a former BBLLC site that was in, and I have another map at the very end if you'd like to see it. It's hidden in the back. But really where this is it's this one right here. And it's in Kings Beach. And the county owns this now. It used to be a redevelopment agency properties, and it's now owned by the county. And so really what we did is we'd like to see some sort of mixed-use development or redevelopment on that site. And so we have just included some programmatic analysis in the EIR to that effect. We just anticipate that there will be some redevelopment on that site in the future, so we felt it would be good to actually analyze that. And then the Tahoe City Lodge, again, is a current project application. So the analysis that's in the environmental document is funded by the applicant, I will point out. And it is project-level analysis. And so you'll hear more about that piece in the future, further here in the presentation. But I will point out that we were really directed by the board to take this approach. It's a little different approach, I know, but it was per the direction of the board. And then finally, this brings me to, I believe, my last slide. So we, over the course of the year, so again, the plan was first released to the public for comment, along with a notice of preparation back in June of 2015. And so over the course of the year, we've received a lot of comments on the area plan from stakeholders. And so we have made refinements throughout the year based upon the input that we received from the stakeholders. And so there was a series of what we called refinement packages that had been published throughout the year. One was in September. the next in April, and then finally this June draft, it really includes all of those changes. And the primary focus of these refinements have been on mobility, just to really demonstrate the county's effort on enhancing mobility efforts and transit in the North Tahoe Basin. I know you folks have heard from on other projects in the Basin area this desire to try to expand and enhance transit. And so you're going to see a lot of policy change and text change in the area plan that's specifically related to that. And there were some other mobility efforts that were underway that we wanted to recognize in the plan too, one being the Fanny Bridge project, and so you'll see a diagram about that project in the area plan as well as some policy. And then also the Truckee River District Special Planning Area that I mentioned earlier, that was brought in to be reflective again of that Fanny Bridge project. There has also been a mobility plan effort that has been underway, and so the area plan is reflective of that, and I'm going to speak a little more to that in a minute here. But then in addition, the board approved a TART systems plan back in April that outlines the county's commitment to transit and opportunities for transit enhancement and improvements, and also ways to fund it. And so the plan is reflective of that effort as well. And then we included a level of service policy that I mentioned earlier, some policy related to ridgeline and viewshed protection, and then some new streetscape and roadway design standards that you'll see in the plan. But that concludes my presentation. But before I go, I just want to talk a little bit more about the mobility plan, because you're probably going to hear from a few folks today that are going to speak to the mobility plan. So I kind of want to set that up for you. So the mobility plan is an effort. The county received a grant actually to look at mobility improvements in the Tahoe City area. And so there were a few different components that were studied through that plan, and one of them is a missing link of the Lakeside Trail between Commons Beach and the Tahoe City Y. And so what we did is we looked at how could you build that missing link, and so we looked at some potential alignments, and there were a few that were studied. There was a public outreach process that went on with this plan, and where we sought input from the folks in the community about what would be their preferred alignment. And the support that we heard from the community was for a lakeside alignment, so which kind of goes around. There's some condos there, the Tahoe Marina lakefront condos. And so you may hear from some of those folks, they're not happy with that alignment. That alignment has been reflected in the area plan along with some text and policy related to the mobility plan in general. And so I just wanted to point that out so that you're not confused if folks get up here and are speaking to that. So with that, I am going to turn the presentation over to Steve Bona to talk about the Tahoe City Lodge, and then he'll hand it off to Adam after he's done. Thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Steve Yolna, Supervising Planner in the Tahoe City office, and I am the project planner for the Tahoe City Lodge project. This project is the redevelopment of an existing commercial property in Tahoe City, which is going to contain, or would contain, a 118-room hotel, the redevelopment of the clubhouse that's part of the Tahoe City golf course, along with a shared parking arrangement between the golf course and the Tahoe City Lodge. So I'll take just a moment to help orient you with where this project is located. On your screen there in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the little red dot where this project is located in relation to the lake. More specifically, on the vicinity map itself, you can see the outline of the project area in red. Actually, I like this pen better. The Y in Tahoe City is located right here, and you can see it's just a short distance to the north and east from the Y. Fairway Drive extends up above the project area, and this is some residential area over there. So. This slide also helps to orient where this project is located. In the area that's outlined in red, this is the downtown Tahoe City area. To the lower portion of the screen is, again, the Y area. Up here you can see the Tahoe City Marina. The golf course that Crystal was just talking about, this is located just north of the project site. This nice lawn area just above that. So the project area, it's listed here as subject site. This is the, most people are more familiar with it as the former Hendrickson properties. So I'll speak to that in just a second here. So this second aerial kind of gives us a little bit better view of the project site. The Hendrickson property, or former Hendrickson property, now owned by Keela Tahoe, which was purchased a couple of years ago, contains 3 existing commercial buildings in this area here. You'll probably hear some comments or discussion about the Bechtold property, which is owned by the Rudnicks, which is this building right here. There are 2 easements on the that are associated with this application and tied to the Hendrickson or the Keela Tahoe site. There's a roadway easement that extends on to the Bechtold property in that area there, and there's a separate roadway easement that it surrounds the property to the north, which is actually located on the golf course site. It's not the easiest to see, but this area right there, that is the existing clubhouse location that's associated with the Tahoe City golf course. And that, I'll show you in a subsequent slide, is to be relocated and reconstructed as part of this project. One of the comments that, or discussion that has come up has to do with the density for the proposed project and which portions of the project from the Tahoe City Golf Course are being pulled in and where that density is being calculated from. So I added this slide here to help try to clarify that matter. The project area itself is 3 acres in site. For the purposes of density, the area indicated here in yellow is the area that will be used to calculate the density. It's 3 acres in site with a density of 40 units per acre. That actually allows for 120 units. The applicant is proposing 118 units. The area here in blue, that's the easement area that I mentioned earlier on the Bechtold property. It's important to note that this area is not being used to calculate the density for the proposed project. This slide also helps to demonstrate, Crystal was speaking earlier about how we go about incorporating the Tahoe City Golf Course property into further projects with the SEZ restoration component. The area, so this area here, that's the Hendrickson, that's 1.4 acres. There's 1.1 acres of the golf course, the remaining yellow area, that's coming into the project area for this. The project will actually restore 1.7 acres, so greater than what is required of SEZ. And you can see those areas in the crosshatch area here, here, and over here. So how does this all fold into the area plan? This slide depicts the proposed zoning that will be contained within the area plan. Once again, the project area is outlined in red. The entirety of this project area is located within the mixed-use zone district. Hotels are a permissible use within the mixed-use zone district of the Tahoe Basin area plan with the approval of a use permit that will be coming later. So as I mentioned, many folks are familiar with the existing Hendrickson property. So this slide here depicts what most people are familiar with on the Hendrickson property. This property was originally developed in 1960 to 1962. It does contain the 3 commercial buildings, which have shared a variety of different commercial uses over the years. Currently, there's some restaurant uses, professional offices, other retail type uses on the site. So next, what would this property look like with the proposed project? Here's a rendering of what the project will look like. This vantage point is looking from State Route 28 in a northeasterly direction through the project area. As you can see from this, actually, all three of the buildings, and I'll explain those in the next and last slide of this presentation, but all three buildings are 4 stories in height. It is important, however, to note that when you're looking at it from this vantage point and from the street view, the front of the building appears to be 3 stories in height. So the ground floor level is going to contain the lobby, hotel operations, as well as a restaurant use. The middle stories 2 and 3 will be the 40 hotel uses units that will be retained by the lodge itself. The 4th floor, which actually has the impression of the 3rd floor, is a rooftop bar and deck and pool area. So moving to the site plan, and this helps to further illustrate the interconnection between the different uses. But again, the project will have the 3 different buildings. So the building that we were just looking at and that I was just describing is this building here along the front. There's also 2 other buildings here. So the 40 hotel units, restaurant, and rooftop bar will be in the building located right along State Route 28 frontage. The 2 other buildings will contain 78 condo hotels, which will be 1 and 2 bedroom suites. It's important to note that for the purposes of zoning and land use, these are essentially hotel uses. That's what we're analyzing under this. The condo connotation simply is relative to the ownership of those units. And the applicant will explain in better detail what that means and how that functions. So the parking, shared parking that was mentioned earlier, is located along the northern side of the property and extends through here up to the clubhouse. It's a little difficult to see from your slide, but the area I'm highlighting right there is the location of the existing clubhouse. There is a shared use parking agreement for the parking area, and the parking has been fully analyzed to consider the offsetting peak demands, and Adam will speak to that in just a minute in his presentation. But also part of this project is the redevelopment of that existing clubhouse. The new clubhouse will contain a conference facility on the 2nd floor. This conference room will be utilized by the Tahoe City Lodge, and there will also be some public use of that facility. So with all that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Adam so he can speak to you about the environmental document on this. Thank you.
All right, good morning. I'm Adam Lewandowski with Ascent Environmental, and I'd like to provide a brief overview of the draft environmental document. Oops. And Commissioner Sevenson, let me apologize in advance if any of this sounds familiar from the TRPA Governing Board yesterday. This is a joint TRPA EIS and a CEQA EIR, and it's also one document that provides both a programmatic analysis of the proposed area plan and a project-level analysis of the Tahoe City Lodge project. These are 2 separate proposals. They'd require 2 separate actions, but they're analyzed together in one document for a couple of reasons. For one, it reduces the length and the amount of duplicate text that the public and decision makers would need to review if these were 2 separate documents at the same time. But more importantly, it allows the Tahoe City Lodge project to serve as a concrete, real-life example of the application of the policies and standards that are included in the area plan. As you review the document, you'll see that under each environmental topic, there's a section that analyzes the long-term effects of implementing the policies and standards that are included in the area plan. And then below that, there's a separate section that analyzes the site-specific effects of the Tahoe City Lodge project on that same resource. So the programmatic level analysis and the project-specific analysis are pretty clearly separated in the document. We are over halfway through the review period, which ends August 15th. And then we'll take all the comments submitted under careful consideration, provide written responses to those, and release a final environmental document later this year. I'd like to start by just giving an overview of the alternatives that are considered in the environmental document. We worked with county and TRPA staff to develop a total of 4 alternatives, and each of these includes a variation on the area plan and a variation on the lodge project. The slide on the screen right now shows the 4 Area plan alternatives. Alternative 1 is the proposed plan that Crystal described. Alternative 2 would be a version of that plan with no substitute standards or map revisions. So that would basically just implement those provisions that were specifically included in the TRPA regional plan. And alternative 3 is what we're calling a reduced intensity area plan. That would be a version of the area plan, but with targeted refinements to try to reduce some environmental effects. And then, of course, alternative 4 is the no project. This just shows some of the areas where those alternatives differ. Those are described in Chapter 3 of the environmental document. And I did want to note that since this is also a TRPA EIS, these alternatives are evaluated in equal level of detail. So you'll see quite a bit more detail on the alternatives than you typically would in a CEQA EIR. These are the 4 Tahoe City Lodge alternatives that are evaluated. Alternative 1 is the proposed lodge project that Steve just described. Alternative 2 is a reduced scale lodge project. That's a project with a smaller footprint, smaller project area, and less than half the number of units, and no expansion of the golf course clubhouse, and no stream zone restoration on the golf course. And alternative 3 is a reduced height lodge project. So that's a project that would include the same number and mix of uses as the proposed project, but within a 3-story building instead of a 4-story building. And then, of course, that would have a larger footprint to provide room for that same number of units in a shorter building. And then, of course, alternative 4 is the no project alternative. The site would remain as it is today as a commercial center, and we'd expect some modest tenant improvements. Again, there's more detail on the alternatives in Chapter 3, but this just really quickly shows the areas where those lodge alternatives differ from each other. And that's a quick overview of the alternatives analyzed in the environmental document. I'd like to now move into summarizing some of the environmental effects. And so the EIR and the EIS evaluates the combined effects of all of the area plan provisions in every element of the Tahoe City Lodge on each resource area. But we've received a lot of comments, and there seems to be a lot of interest in some of the specific provisions and specific policies that are included in the area plan. So we'd like to do something a little bit different, and rather than going through the typical kind of environmental topic by environmental topic, I'd like to first summarize some of the general environmental effects of those key policies, and then move into the summary of environmental impacts. So as Crystal mentioned, the area plan includes a provision that would allow conversions of commercial floor area into tourist accommodation units under the TRPA growth management system. This would use a conversion ratio that was developed by TRPA and is intended to be environmentally neutral on a regional scale. But this environmental review provides a more site-specific evaluation of that ratio that was developed by TRPA. And it includes some specific assumptions on the number and the location of these conversions. What this program would do would allow roughly the same amount of development that would otherwise be allowed under the growth control system, but would allow up to 400 more tourist lodging units and a corresponding reduction in commercial area. This would result in a slight reduction in vehicle miles traveled within the basement, and that's from the placement of these tourist units within the town centers and the number of trips and trip lengths associated with those units. It would also, though, contribute to a slight worsening of level of service during the PM peak hour. And that's because while these tourist uses generate fewer vehicle miles than a commercial use, those vehicle trips tend to be concentrated around the afternoon rush hour when people are arriving at their hotel, as compared to a commercial use where the vehicle trips are spread out more evenly throughout the day. This program would also affect the jobs to housing ratio. Currently, there are more jobs than housing within the plan area, and would bring that closer into balance. It would also affect water demand because tourist uses tend to use a bit more water than commercial uses do, but not to the extent that would result in a significant impact. So Crystal described some of the map changes that are included in the area plan. And many of these changes would not really have specific environmental effects. For example, the core and transition areas would result in concentrating the tallest buildings in the center of the town centers and limiting height to lower levels around the edges. The special planning areas, for the most part, would require additional mobility or restoration improvements before the area plan standards take effect, but they wouldn't change the underlying standards that would apply in those areas. As Crystal mentioned, some areas that are currently zoned residential but are in public ownership would be rezoned to conservation or recreation, and that would really just reflect the existing uses and generally allow less intensive uses than would otherwise be allowed. There is a Tahoe City Town Center boundary revision, and that would reduce the size of that TRPA designated town center by 2.9 acres, and it would reduce the amount of sensitive lands within that town center. That primarily affects land use and noise compatibility. The land use analysis found that the proposed boundary revision was consistent with the TRPA regional plan and code provisions that govern those town center boundaries, and that it would not result in incompatible land uses. And the noise analysis found that with the implementation of existing project level noise requirements, the boundary change would not result in incompatible noise levels. The area plan also includes a provision that would allow non-contiguous project areas, and this is modeled after a former TRPA code provision that used to apply in redevelopment areas. Basically, it would allow an owner of multiple non-contiguous parcels that are within the same town center to propose one project that includes those multiple parcels. It wouldn't change the overall development potential of those parcels, but it would allow density and land coverage that would otherwise be allowed on separate parcels to be consolidated onto one or more of those parcels. The environmental review did identify one potentially significant impact of this proposal, and that's related to scenic resources, because in some cases, a non-contiguous project area could allow density and land coverage that would otherwise be allowed between the major highways and the mountain to be concentrated on parcels that are between the major highways and the lake. And that could allow more visible mass between the highway and the lake, and degrade views of the lake or degrade views from the lake looking towards the shoreline. The environmental document included a mitigation measure that would restrict the land coverage and density under a non-contiguous project area between the major roadways in the lake to what would otherwise be allowed, and that would reduce that impact to a less than significant level. This provision also affects land coverage and hydrology and water quality. With respect to coverage, it could affect exactly where within a town center that land coverage could be placed, but it wouldn't increase land coverage above what's already allowed, and it wouldn't allow any additional land coverage in sensitive lands. And any project using a non-contiguous project area would be required to comply with the same stormwater BMPs and stormwater management requirements as any other project, and that would not result in a measurable effect on water quality. The area plan would also allow secondary residential units, or the secondary dwelling units, on parcels less than 1 acre within a quarter mile of transit. And again, these second dwelling units would be subject to the same land coverage, design standards, and residential allocation requirements as any other residential use. So they'd be required to get those residential allocations consistent with the TRPA growth control system. The EIR and EIS use data from a similar program in the city of South Lake Tahoe and from other projects within Placer County to try to estimate the usage of this program. And it found that it would probably see fairly limited use, that maybe about 5% of new residential units would be these secondary dwelling units. And that's because these secondary units would be competing with all other residential uses for a limited pool of development rights under the growth control system. This provision would have some effect on transportation due to the requirement that these be within a quarter mile of transit. It would not increase the overall population, but it would affect housing, and that it would provide some more moderately priced housing options. The area plan includes some revised parking standards, and these were developed as part of a comprehensive parking study that was conducted to support the development of the plan. In general, the parking standards would reduce the parking requirements for some uses. They would promote shared use parking, and it would waive the parking requirement for some small-scale projects that provide transit funding. The land use analysis found that this is consistent with the TRPA regional plan and code provisions that actually encourage alternative parking strategies as a way to reduce land coverage and make more efficient use of land within town centers. The transportation analysis found that these provisions would still meet parking demand while promoting multimodal transportation options. And this is one of those areas where the Tahoe City Lodge project really serves as a real-life example of the application of these policies. The Lodge project does propose a shared-use parking, and the analysis is beginning on page 10-48 if you're interested. But it looked at the hour-by-hour parking demand for the Lodge project, the golf course, and the restaurant and bar that would be associated with the Lodge. And that's what's shown on the graph on the slide here. Beginning with 6 a.m. on the left and going to midnight, it shows the hour-by-hour parking demand for each of those uses. You can see the light blue in the bottom shows the parking demand for the Lodge itself, and you can see there's a fair amount of parking throughout the day. Some of that reflects people that are expected to come and park once at the Lodge and then walk, bike, or take transit to different destinations throughout the day. But there is a decrease in parking demand for the Lodge around the middle of the day when some people would get in their cars and drive to other destinations. And that decrease in parking demand for the Lodge coincides with the peak periods for parking demand for the other accessory uses and the golf course in particular. And the transportation analysis found that the shared parking would meet the parking demand on a peak day. So I summarized some of the key area plan provisions and the general effects of those. But again, the environmental document evaluates the combined effects of all of those area plan provisions and all of the components of the Tahoe City Lodge project. So there are a number of topics where both the area plan and the Lodge had either no impact or had a less than significant impact, and those are related to land use, biological resources, public services and utilities, and recreation. There are also quite a few other topics where the area plan and or the Lodge project had a potentially significant impact, but where that impact could be mitigated to a less than significant level. And those are shown in the list on the bottom. The environmental review did identify 2 transportation-related significant and unavoidable effects, and these are related to localized congestion within Tahoe City. So all of the area plan alternatives, including the no project alternative, would contribute to an unacceptable level of service on the State Route 28 between Grove Street and the Tahoe City Y, and also at the Grove Street and Grove Street and State Route 28 intersection. The environmental document does include mitigation measures that are in addition to the area plan provisions and in addition to existing mitigation programs. And these include the requirement for the development of an additional or a new county service area zone of benefit that would provide an ongoing funding source for transit enhancements in the area. And it also requires the construction of a pedestrian beacon crossing at the Grove Street and State Route 28 intersection. These mitigations would reduce the effects on level of service, but even after mitigation, the level of service would remain significant and unavoidable. All of the area plan alternatives would also result in some level of future greenhouse gas emissions from the construction and operation of buildings. These greenhouse gas emissions would be less than today, and they'd be less than what was analyzed under the regional plan environmental document. And those reductions would be the result of reductions in vehicle miles traveled and the replacement of older buildings with newer, more efficient buildings. Even though the area plan would result in a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, this decrease would not be substantial enough to meet California targets, and it would therefore be a significant impact. The environmental document includes a mitigation measure that requires implementation of all feasible measures for new projects and retrofits that are recommended by the Placer County Air Pollution Control District. And that mitigation is consistent with the Regional Sustainability Action Plan, and it would further reduce those greenhouse gas emissions, but still not to the point that they would achieve California targets. And so that, even though there's a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, that remains significant and unavoidable. And the environmental document also identified some beneficial impacts related to vehicle miles traveled and water quality. None of the Tahoe City Lodge or area plan alternatives would exceed the regional vehicle miles traveled threshold that's set by TRPA. And in fact, area plan alternatives 1, the proposed plan, and alternative 3 would actually reduce vehicle miles traveled to below existing levels, and that would be a beneficial effect. Likewise, the alternative 2 for the Tahoe City Lodge would also reduce VMT. The area plan alternatives 1, the proposed plan, as well as alternative 2, would focus on concentrating land coverage and concentrating development within these town centers of Kings Beach and Tahoe City. And that would promote increased redevelopment of those existing properties and bring them into compliance with existing water quality regulations. And based on pollutant load reduction modeling conducted as part of the environmental analysis, we found that the redevelopment of the Kings Beach and Tahoe City Town Center would actually reduce the amount of phosphorus, nitrogen, and fine sediment that flows into Lake Tahoe from those areas. And so that would result in a localized beneficial water quality impact from the redevelopment of the Tahoe City and Kings Beach Town Center. In addition, there was a few beneficial impacts that were related to bike and pedestrian facilities, enhanced recreational access, and improved light and glare conditions with the new dark sky provisions in the area plan. And those would all result from the area plan or any of the other action alternatives. So I'd like to thank you for your patience. I know that was a lot of information. As Crystal mentioned, there's a number of county Ascent and TRPA staff who are available for clarifying questions. But again, just want to remind you the purpose of today is really to record comments on the draft environmental document. We'll take all of those under careful consideration and provide written responses in the final document. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Crystal to wrap things up.
Thank you, Adam and Steve. So again, as Adam just noted, the purpose of today's hearing is to really accept comments on the draft environmental document, not to deliberate on the projects. And real quick, I just wanted to talk about timeline. We anticipate, so the public review comment period ends on August 15th, and then we will begin to prepare responses to the comments that we received during the public comment period. And we anticipate a final document to be out in November, and before your commission again in November for deliberation. And then we are targeting actually being before the board in December, if possible, for deliberation. Followed by, this also has to be adopted by the TRPA governing board and considered by their planning commission, as well as their regional plan implementation committee. So there's going to be a number of future meetings coming up starting in November. That's what we're targeting. So again, so what we're asking you today is to accept comments on the draft environmental document and then direct staff to respond to all written and oral comments in the final. Before we do that, what I'd like to point out is that Samir Tuma, the project applicant for the Tahoe City Lodge project, has some slides that he'd like to present to your commission today. So I'm going to turn it over to him before you open it up, if okay, before you open it up to public comment.
Thank you, Crystal. Commissioners, good morning. My name is Samir Tuma. I'm with the Tahoe City Lodge. Our company owns and operates several small boutique hotels in Northern California. And our philosophy has always been to be deeply integrated into the community and produce a product and an environment that reflects the character of the community and works well. Also, we have always operated under green hotel standards, and we intend to do that here. And so, well, first things I want to say is congratulations to the staff and to TRPA staff and Ascent also for preparing a very thorough document, one that I personally have read through many times now and know quite well. And I will say through my years as a planning commissioner and also as an applicant, I've seen lots of these, and I think this is a pretty good one. So congratulations to the team for pulling that together. So I just wanted to walk you through a few things about the project to help you in your analysis of the document at this point, and put some details onto the project, and of course be here to answer any questions. And one of the first things that I wanted to point out is, this property was in prior possession of a family for 50 odd years, the Hendrickson family, and it was about a little over 3 years ago that it first came onto the market. And I was actually, at the time, I was overseas, and I got a phone call from a local family here of 30 years, and they knew that I have a long, strong history with Lake Tahoe and in the hotel business, and I got a call, and they said, Samir, you got to come look at this property. It's a fantastic location. The community's been talking for decades about putting a hotel in this location, and so come have a look. And so what we did was really embarked over the course of the last 3 years on what is a community-driven vision for this project. So we met with the community individually. We've held community meetings. We reviewed the area plan team results. We reviewed the visioning process and really came up with what we think is something that is reflective of what the community as a whole wants. Does that mean everybody's entirely happy? Of course not. But we think that the vast majority of the community is excited about it. Why? Well, the location here is fantastic. It's right as you come into town. What currently there is admittedly probably the least attractive set of buildings in all of Tahoe City, and we'd really like to change that. So as people arrive, have a great sense of arrival. We're right across the street from the lake. We back up to the golf course. Importantly, there's transit right out front. There's a bus stop on either side of the highway there. The bike paths are there. It's very walkable, very bikeable, and really meets that kind of central location. In addition to the golf course behind us, there's a sledding hill and hopefully a seasonal ice skating rink. And there's shuttles that go right in front of where the hotel will be to go to the ski resort. So it really does fit with the model of sort of a downtown center location that allows easy access. There are really some terrific environmental benefits, which we'll go into a little bit later. The economic and job creation benefits are also fantastic. I'll talk about those in a little more detail. And also, we have entered into a tentative public-private partnership with the golf course in order to help them achieve their vision for the reasons of buying the course, and also to create an environment where we can use a shared use parking arrangement so that we're not paving over all of Tahoe City, but rather using complementary uses at different times. I think Steve's covered some of this, but essentially 118 units, 40 of those will be hotel rooms, 78 will be condo hotel rooms, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about what that means. So in this instance, condo is strictly a form of ownership, not a way of operation. And the difference being that typically if someone buys a standard condo, they can come live in it. They can do whatever they want to. They own that. These are going to be deed restricted pursuant to terms that we're negotiating with the TRPA right now. In order to classify as a TAU, you have to have a very, very limited number of nights that an owner can actually stay there. The balance of the time, the units are available for to operate as a hotel. So the average person that arrives there, it'll be a 118-room hotel, and they'll have the choice of different styles or different sizes of units. Most of hotel development done now in the Mountain West, and you see there's a bunch of it here even in Tahoe, is done this way. And it has to do with the highly seasonal nature and essentially the ability to make a project feasible. But it'll operate as a hotel, it'll look like a hotel, and importantly, it'll generate TOT as a hotel. I'll skip a couple of bullets here because I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. So here's the site plan that Steve did talk about some, and you know this is where the bulk of the units and the hotel and main restaurant will be. One of the things, the old golf course clubhouse is right here. When we first started talking to the golfing community, one of the things that we heard was, it's not really in the putting green is over here. And they said, that putting green is not really in the right location. It should be over by the first tee. And so we proposed this idea of moving the center over here. The ground floor will be exactly what's there right now in terms of a pro shop and a restaurant and all that sort of stuff. And then the second floor will be conference room space that we will use for events, but also the PUD will have access to it for meetings or perhaps planning commission meetings someday. And then the area in between, which goes along the back here over through this direction, this will be the shared parking that both Steve and Adam were talking about. And again, you saw on that graph where the demand for a hotel parking goes down during the course of the day, and that's when you have the peak demand for a golf course, of course. So that's what makes the uses complementary in that regard. So this is what we have there now. I'm not happy about it, and I know most of town is not happy about it, but we're certainly believe that it's, that there's a lot of nice trees there. It's a good location, and we think with some creative ideas, we can come up with something that looks a whole lot nicer. I did want to talk a little bit more about this. Rendering and how the front building works. As you noticed from the previous slides, the layout of that lot is very narrow at the front, and it goes back. And so the street frontage was very important to us because we don't want to create something that is out of character with the other buildings in town. So we've designed this building where we have an articulated front to break up the massing. We have really visually, it'll be 3 stories at the pedestrian level. The 4th story is open air, so it really will feel like a 3-story building. And interesting and importantly, this building is actually a couple of feet shorter than the blue agave, which is just up the hill. Our property sits down in a bit of a valley, so as you go up the hill, the blue agave is actually slightly higher. So we think that it'll fit in very nicely to the community. So a little bit about the benefits. The environmental benefits are significant. Obviously, we'd be eliminating a pretty horrible blight here. We would be reducing vehicle miles traveled as compared to continuing to operate it as a shopping center. We would have under Alternative 1, which is the project proposal, we would have a significant restoration requirement. The reduced coverage is also substantial under Alternative 1 versus, say, Alternative 3, which is sort of the shorter, fatter building. And we will build the project to a LEED standard. That's something that we're committed to doing. We'll see as the numbers evolve what level LEED that is, but we will build it to a LEED standard. Job creation is substantial during the construction period. Based on a study that we had done by Jones Lang LaSalle, we anticipate about 317 jobs being created and an ongoing of 76 FTE once we're up and operating. The economic benefits to the community at a very high summary level, again, the construction project, the jobs it'll generate, the things that we'll be buying, a little over $43 million during construction, and then on an ongoing basis through TOT, property taxes, sales taxes, job creation, et cetera, an additional $8.6 million a year that we'll bring into the economy. From a community perspective, it really helps this vision that the community's been working on for over a decade, bringing lodging to town in this location and help feed the other businesses. The new clubhouse is something that I think, in particular, the golf community is excited about, but also having another facility in town that we can use for public meetings and other gathering, I think is a strong enhancement. Property values in the area will go up. I think that's certainly, I think, self-evident. And then the ability to leverage the transit options. I mean, we really do have some transit issues in North Lake Tahoe. And the fact that we are right across the street from the bike path, walking to the lake, and the buses, I think really is terrific in terms of how it'll operate. Just very quickly, public-private partnership that we've been talking to the PUD, the county, and the Resort Association about, who are the owners of that, allows us jointly to construct BMPs because of the way the projects sit together, so there'll be significant environmental benefit there. The restoration, we've talked about that, but an additional 1.7 acres. We've already done some preliminary work on that area to see if the area we had envisioned would actually take to restoration, and we've got some very good results through IERS, local environmental firm, that's looked at that. The clubhouse conference room space, and again, the shared parking arrangement, so we're not paving over paradise. So with that, certainly available to answer any questions as we go through. I very much appreciate your time and attention. As somebody who's been spending a good portion of my life in Lake Tahoe since 1988, having gotten married here, raised my children here, very excited about the opportunity to bring this project to Tahoe City and to help with the revitalization. So thanks very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that concludes our presentation. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm just going to take the clicker over here so we can, if we need to go back to slides, we can.
Okay. Before we do open it to public comment, I want to give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions or get some clarification. So I'll throw it open for that. I have some, but I'm going to let the others go first.
Go ahead. I just had 2 days of this. Go ahead.
With Rich. Do you want me to start? Yes. Okay. I'm going to go kind of by sections where my questions were, starting with 510. And it's related to lots that are still have development rights, but there's 820 of them. And when you say they have the rights, are they obviously TRPA has their growth restrictions that allow just so many to be developed, I guess, on an ongoing basis. But are those all ones that could be built at this point? They've been sort of approved. Is that what that's indicating? You don't have to come up, Crystal, if you want to. Just answer it right there. Then I'm good with that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I've got a mic right in front of me. Yeah, so what page were you at again, 510?
510.
So yeah, the lots, I mean, they would still need to get a residential allocation to construct, but I believe that the number that you're referring to is the number of vacant, if I'm right?
Right, vacant
Yeah,
lots,
vacant
correct.
residential lots,
Right.
yes. But again, if someone is intending to build on those lots, they would need to go through they would have to acquire a residential unit allocation.
And obviously, TRPA has their limitations on how many can be developed at a time. And is there a formula to that, or is there just an allocation of just a few each year that they can develop?
We get a certain number allocated to us, and so does every jurisdiction in the basin. And so I don't know if Lucia Maloney wants to add to that in terms of sort of the overall, it's very complex, that system.
Yeah.
So if you...
You don't
But
have to
yes,
go into
we
great
get.
detail. I'm just kind of curious how many get released kind of each year to go ahead and develop them.
Yeah, I don't know what the methodology is in terms of the numbers that are released every year, but I do know that. Oh, Steve will get this one.
Yeah.
Typically, what's the number that gets
So the
allowed?
2012 regional plan allocated or anticipated 2,600 residential allocations, and that's anticipated over a 20-year period. I think a certain amount are held back for a special pool, but that's every other year there's a performance evaluation of all the jurisdictions that dictates how many allocations are awarded to which jurisdiction.
I guess one of my questions kind of related to something else I'm going to get to later is that as these are looked at, obviously different agencies are giving input into the development of these particular lots and the risks that may be, because as you know from at least those of you who've been around me, know that fire risk and life safety issues are really important to me. And it was commented later, which I was going to again reference, is that the fire district that represents the majority of this area has indicated that there's some real challenges on some of these streets. There are only one access in, they're very narrow roads, and whether, some of these lots could actually consciously, be approved without creating greater risk to the community. That's, I guess, maybe I'm getting on a soapbox a little bit on that, but I'm just curious that I know that there's got to be some input as to whether they really should, whether those things should be developed at some point.
Well,
Maybe I can help mix up a little bit. One of the things that TRPA intended to do was to tie the allocation to the performance of other duties as well, water quality things basin-wide, and forest health is an element. So all these things go into maintaining your allocation annually, because if you don't, then the option is there to lower that allocation as sort of a penalty until you bring it back up and comply with the environmental things, the water quality and all those other things. So it's kind of an ongoing thing, and it gets appraised every year, and I think it's a 2-year cycle actually, as I recall. And so it's going to be reviewed all the time. It's not going to just get put in place and forgotten. It gets massaged continuously. If that helps any, I don't know if it did or not.
Well, it's obviously being on this side of, in Placer County, being on this side of the ridge and the basin has lots of implications that are not, that we don't have to face outside of. So there's sort of more of a regulator on the accelerator here as far as development. And so the other, I'm going to move on to the next one that I had, which is, this is just more of a comment of interest that is on 6.5, and that's the population in the basin area has actually gone down pretty substantially, which is interesting to me. And I guess I'd be curious what the reason for that is. Are a lot of these homes changing over, and we're getting people who are more, this is a second home kind of situation? Is that why we're seeing that?
I'm on. Yes, so we definitely have an increase in vacation, rentals in the basin, and so a lot of second homes. We've seen that. So we did prepare an existing conditions report, which found that population has been declining, and so has the economy. And so really the intent here with the plan is to try to revitalize these communities and allow for workforce housing and really bring people into to create a more vibrant North Lake Tahoe area. But yes, there has been a population decline and an increase in second homes.
Would that also translate into less of an impact? If you've got people are not on an ongoing basis living in an area, is there less of an impact to that region or that area? I mean, I guess that's a question.
If Adam wants to speak to the impact piece.
Yeah, I think in general, the effect of that is more seasonal impact. So you see, more traffic impacts, level of service, and that sort of thing during the peak periods, the summer and the weekends, and kind of winter weekends, but less throughout the year than if you had a greater resident population.
Okay, thanks, Alex. The other comment is just kind of a correction sort of thing, which you probably already have noticed. 6.7 on the employment in trade, transportation, and utilities. Something in 2014 doesn't quite look right. That number looks like it somehow got carried over from information because it's indicating that there's actually been an increase in that particular area, but looking at the number 2,200 is off. So unless you've got another explanation for that. Do you see what I'm commenting on?
Are you on
6.7. If you look at trade, transportation, and utilities, the drop in the employment number in 2014 happens to be the same as information, but it doesn't translate into the 42% increase. Is that making sense?
Yeah, we will take a look at that
Okay.
in the final. Thanks.
Again, that's more of a correction sort of thing. Now the next is, I was going to move into 18, which is again related to fire risk. And again, all my comments are related to more of a regional impact. They're not specific to these projects, either in Kings Beach or in Tahoe City. I guess I'm trying to kind of get a handle on things that are the existing conditions and things that would happen in the future that might have exacerbate problems. That's what I'm trying to get to, and make sure that as we were setting out sort of roadmaps, as this plan is a roadmap, that issues are being addressed. Obviously, on 18.1, the community's biggest concern was related to the risk of because of fire, just because of the high risk in the area, which I found it interesting that, obviously CAL FIRE or the state has evaluated the fire risks in the area, and for the most part, it's up on the higher end of the scale. So, in fact, the Tahoe City Lodge project, I thought was interesting that it said that it was in a very high risk, which I would assume that would have been further up the hills where your higher risk is, not so much down by the lake. But one of my questions was on 18.3 with the fuel reduction, because I noticed that a lot of what it's stating in here of how they're addressing the risk is related to getting rid of a lot of the fuel reduction. And that's hit in a couple of different areas here, but it talks about specific acreages that are being, and that's more on 1812 and 1813, especially 13. I'm curious, they have specific acreage numbers in here where they're trying to do fuel reduction. And I guess, I don't know if it's more of a curiosity, but I'd be interested to know how far those projects have gotten. Are they 10% completed? Are they, 20% completed? I mean, because if we're trying to understand the risk as it exists today and how much we're going to create more of a risk by bringing in more development, more potential population into the area, if that is the main sort of a process to eliminating or at least decreasing risk, it would be good to know how that's progressing. Because I think if you read the top part of 1813, where it talks about the North Tahoe Fire Protection District, where it says many of the communities within the North Tahoe Protection District are surrounded by wildfire fuels on multiple sides and often have a single road for ingress and egress. These isolated communities with poor access present challenges to fire suppression efforts. Even evacuating these communities during an event is very difficult. So, that's a unique problem up here, and it's one that obviously, to me, needs to be really looked at it pretty carefully. And I don't know whether just fuel reductions is enough to really kind of lessen some of those risks. So that's just that's a concern that I've had. And so I think that's kind of the end of my comments on that.
Maybe I could address that a little bit, Wayne, if you want to hear it. Since I serve on the Conservancy and we have a member of the Forest Service as one of our board members, we talk about this quite a bit. And the work that gets done initially is in conjunction with the local fire districts and the Conservancy and the Forest Service, is the interface between the housing areas and the actual forest. And that area gets maintained annually. It gets looked at, it gets discussed, it gets acted on. The area beyond that is almost totally under the guise of the U.S. Forest Service. And as an example, the area behind us here from the state line to, say, Squaw Valley is under siege, I guess, right now. The Forest Service is clearing, it's cleared of, at least what they tell me, they've cleared a third of that area this so far and made it fire safe, so to speak. They think they'll finish the remaining third on over to Squaw Valley in the next 2 years. And so it started out a 3-year program, and they indicate that they're still on track with that program. That in conjunction with an aggressive program that the county's even involved in, that is if you call for an inspection for anything on your property and it looks like it's a fire safe, they write it up. I got a comment by the building department not long ago about there was some pine needles around the house. I won't sign this off until that's taken care of. So there is an aggressive project ongoing by everyone to eliminate as much of the fire hazard as possible, and I think it's a big effort. The other thing that the Tahoe Basin has the advantage of is national exposure. If there's a fire somewhere that is using equipment in some other location, and there's a fire here, that equipment will most likely get moved here in a bad situation. At least that's the opinion of the Forest Service, and they have control over it. So I think we're approaching a much better outlook for fire safety in the future. And I think, but it's a lot of work, it's expensive, and it's very time consuming. And one of the big issues that we're working on right now is what to do with all the stuff we take out. That's the price of lumber's not worth much at all right now, and so it doesn't make any payback for what you're doing. So it's very difficult, and we're trying to get a co-generator going at the landfill to generate electricity with that material. We've run aground a little bit with the power company. They agreed on one price, and now they've changed their mind, and so it's economics, and maybe that'll get corrected. But at any rate, everybody's moving forward pretty heartily to control the fire danger as best we can. I can't speak to roadways and getting in and out so much as I can what's going to burn and how bad it's going to get and how it's going to be controlled. It does sound positive. If that helps any.
It is very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that, Larry. Okay. Others want to comment, question at this point? Public. Okay, then before we get started with the public comment, I'd like to kind of give some guidelines to today. I think it's been mentioned on a number of occasions earlier that this is just specifically to address questions related to the draft environmental impact report. Again, the merits of this will be, of the projects or the overall plan will be at later hearings. So I would ask that those who would like to get up and speak, that they speak specifically to the draft EIR, and that you not talk about whether you like this or you don't like it, but that you would ask for if there are areas where you believe that are deficient or that they need greater clarification, then those are things that we need to know. And that it would be very helpful if you would cite specifically areas in it. If numbers would be helpful, so that would help the staff if you could exactly pinpoint the areas where you think need to be addressed further. There will obviously be responses, both if you do it in writing or if you do it today or any of the, I guess there's one meeting left where you'll have the opportunity to speak verbally on this. There will be a response to whatever you have to say. You will get that directly, and it will also be addressed in the final EIR. I'm going to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And when that yellow light comes on, you've got 30 seconds. Out of respect to everyone else in the room, I'm going to hold you to the 3 minutes. And so if the red light comes on, I'm going to ask you to quickly wrap up your comments. If you've made comments at previous meetings, those have already been duly noted, and you don't need to necessarily bring them up again at this point. But I would ask you to be respectful of the time and just get right to your points. So we have asked you to sign in, and if you have not signed in, I would ask you to do that now. I assume there's still a sign-up sheet over there. We will call you up. So again, we have a more orderly process to this. So you will be called up. So with that, unless there's any other comments or questions, we'll get started with that.
Okay, and I'd just like to make sure can everybody hear me?
Yep.
So just clarification, the only verbal comments on the draft EIR will be at this meeting today. Any other comments on the draft EIR would have to be in writing and provided by the deadline date. Pardon me? And NITRAC, that is August 11th at NITRAC. Clarification, thank you. So what I'm going to do for public commenters, I have a list. I'll read 3 names off just so you know where you're in order. When you hear your name, please come up. So the first 3 names, Melanie, and I apologize if I don't get any of these pronunciations right, but Melanie Purcell, Don Hillebrandt, Carol White. Melanie?
No comment.
Don?
I like Carol the first one.
Okay.
Do I have to turn this on?
No.
Okay.
You're on.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and planning staff. My name is Carol White, and I live in Tahoe City at Tahoe Marina Lakefront. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. At recent hearings, I've spoken about how there's a specific line drawn in Area Plan Map 5.5, which shows a shared use path from Commons Beach to Fanny Bridge, directly in front of Tahoe Marina Lakefront's narrow lakefront. Aside from the map, the area plan itself states that the preferred alignment is along the narrow shoreline at TML, as does the mobility plan. None of these things is analyzed in the EIR. Yesterday, before the TRPA Governing Board, the county clarified that this path is only conceptual in nature, and the path is shown only to illustrate a possible path. We appreciate this clarification, but we strongly urge and request that the specific line drawn in the Transportation Infrastructure and Improvements map for Tahoe City, map 5.5, be replaced with the alignment in the September 2015 area plan or the June 2015 area plan, which accompanied the NOP. To show project-level specificity of a lakeside alignment at this time without analysis under CEQA, which requires analysis commensurate with the specificity shown in the plan, would violate CEQA. That language about commensurate with the specificity comes directly from CEQA case law, which, as you probably know, CEQA is about 70% case law and the rest of it the guidelines and the statute. The language in the area plan also should reflect the generality of policy TP 31, which calls for a bike path from Commons Beach to the Y. In order to not jeopardize the lawful certification shown in the EIR of the area plan, the map should be as neutral as the county says it is. Maps and general plans and area plans have a way of becoming detached from the plan itself, showing up in newspapers or other publications. Finally, we realize mobility is key, and we want to make the Commission aware that the urging of the county, we have worked on a plan drawn up by an engineer that would chop off the front 15 feet or so of our reception area so the path could be set back safely from the road and sidewalk for 120 yards before it goes back down to the lake or down Mackinac, whichever the county deems appropriate. And along those 120 yards, we have even worked out a way that the path would include views of our beautiful lake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm also a resident of Tahoe Marina Lakefront. I have 2 condominium units there, one for about 33 years and the other more recently. I have been on the board for 18 years and was president for 9 years. But perhaps more importantly, I'm a consulting civil and geotechnical engineer, and I've been practicing over 50 years. And I've taken a close look at this. And several years ago, we retained the services of the Gary Davis Group, and they did a detailed study. We actually have a plan that shows it going on the lakeside. And as Samir said, if in his hotel, they literally will be able to walk across the street to our path. And so this is a copy that 2 years ago we sent to the county, sent to TRPA, and sent to the Tahoe City PUD. So if anybody, and we're open. Cindy yesterday at the end of her comments said that in order to make the connection, it's going to require compromise, and Cindy knows. I've written letters to her, I've had conversations with her. TML is willing to compromise, and we hope the agencies will also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next 3, Aaron Rudnick, Dave Edwards, and Aiden Miles.
Good morning, thank you. Aaron Rudnick, local citizen, property owner, commercial, residential, adjacent neighbor to this proposed project. I'll try to keep this brief. There's so many issues with this. One of the big things to begin with is clarity and inconsistencies. Half the time it's described as 1.4 acres, which is the actual property he owns there at the Hendrickson. The rest of the time it's 3 acres, but the SEZ is only rated against the 1.4, even though it's using 3 acres for the entire property. I'd like to see that a final determination whether or not this is a 3-acre project or a 1.4, because it makes a big difference, and we just keep swapping the numbers in and out when it's convenient to what we're trying to get from it. With that consistency, the Bechtold building should be on every map. That very first map he shows you, shows all this coming in. It's not described that all this is actually our property, and you don't even see the building over there, but yet it's part of the project area. I would like to see that there. I'd like to see the neighbors. I saw at the very last slide it was thrown in from yesterday, but it's not on any of the others. There are 3 alternates. It was said yesterday that he absolutely would not build alternate 2. I would insist then that we see a different alternate as alternate 2 if that one's not going to happen. I mean, having the reduced one and the one that's less offensive to all the other neighbors requires less freebies, less gimmies from other agencies is absolutely not an option. Let's find an option that is a compromise as stated. Because if it's not going to happen, it's not an actual alternative. With that, alternative ingress and egress, that is our property that is going to be used as the only and main entrance. It's going to go through our property to get to the middle there where the check-in is. It's already so bogged down with golf course traffic, everyone in and out. It took us almost 15 minutes to turn left today to come out there. Farmers market finds people parking all the way over there. You have no visibility down the street to try to turn to get through there. I'd like to see something as far as safety, like you said as well. That's over 118 rooms. Not everyone's going to just come in one car. We learned that enough with rafting. Nothing's worse than seeing a family of 8 come in 3 vehicles when they could have carpooled. But it happens all the time. That is a huge amount of cars to only be coming out of one driveway that's already used for 2 other things. The CAFA to TAUs, transferring those around, we're displacing roughly a dozen local businesses kicking out of here anyways. We lost our Chinese restaurant to the Lighthouse redevelopment. We're going to lose our Taiwan Now. No more Asian food in Tahoe. Aside from that, other local businesses, Delish in the burrito window. It's Lee Creasy. He cut his bones and earned being in Tahoe forever being the chef at Sunnyside. Struck out on his own, has done fantastic. Has no place to go now. Asked me for a kitchen, a place to find. There's nowhere to go with these people. Building in Tahoe is a privilege, and it should be treated as such. Instead of all these freebies and all these gimmies, I'd like to see a lot more of this consistent on there. As far as typos and things, absolutely no excuse at this point in this level. I mean, there was some yesterday. I think at this point, with what's at stake, we should see a lot more consistency and a lot less errors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Edwards. Aiden Miles.
First, thank you, commissioners, for hearing comments today. My name is Aiden Miles. I have a property maintenance and management business. I should let you know that I manage Tahoe Marina Lodge. I should also let you know that my office is in the Bechtold building next door. So a bunch of different things going on here. I just wanted to bring up a couple of comments that perked my ears up during this today. One was the discussion of the jobs to housing ratio. I can tell you, in hiring people this year, this is the toughest year we've had as far as being able to attract employees, and a lot of that has to do with housing. So there was commentary about currently more jobs than housing. By creating things, it brings this closer into line. I may be taking it wrong, but I mean, you're creating a 118 unit condo-tel that just based on deed restrictions doesn't provide any living space for anyone, and you're also creating 76 full-time equivalent jobs. So you're creating more housing, that doesn't actually do anything to help the housing or the staffing crisis. Parking demand for the Tahoe City Lodge project, there was a comment that most people would be out during the middle of the day, and it should evenly kind of space things out. Like I said, I'm in the Bechtold building. I look at the clubhouse. I look at the number 3 green. Majority of golfers, in my mind, come in the morning, some very early. But the bulk of traffic in there, I would argue, is before noon during the day, and that's still at a point in time when people will still be in residence in their hotel rooms and won't have gone off to do anything else. And then finally, my only other statement was the access easement, which Aaron alluded to. It eliminates roughly a dozen parking spaces from the building where our office is. We have 2 employees in our office right now. We have room for more, and we will have more in the future. So we're taking away parking from a commercial building, and in doing that, you're not allowing them in the future, were they to want to expand their building, all of a sudden parking that they once had has been eliminated, and they won't have enough parking, if they were to do something else. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next 3, Shannon Gallmeyer, Sam Rudnick, and Ellie Waller.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Shannon Eckmeyer, League to Save Lake Tahoe. I want to thank all of you for coming to Tahoe again this month, and thank you for your robust discussion earlier this month relating to MARTIS and traffic issues. That is a lot what our comment letter is going to focus on, so I'll dive into specifics relating to the environmental review in just a moment. I wanted to first thank and highlight 2 parts of the area plan. Thank Crystal Jacobson for all of her work on this. I know she's been working on this for almost 5 years. She's kept the lines of communication open with the league throughout the process, so we're really grateful for that. I wanted to highlight the Tahoe City Town Center modification and the associated deed restriction language. I know that deed restrictions are not taken lightly, and it was 2 years of discussion through the Tahoe City Golf Oversight Committee, had to get the placer approval, Truckee Airport, Tahoe City PUD, a lot of stakeholders, the North Tahoe Resort Association. So really want to thank Crystal again and Cindy Jefferson for the Tahoe City PUD. We all really got on board, and it's really a great example of stakeholder input. We're really excited to see the on-site SEZ restoration. Also, the TART update plan that Placer Board of Soups approved in April. That's part of this area plan. We're really excited and hope that Placer can actually find funding mechanisms to make this work so that we can see improved public transit not only on the North Shore, but use that as a model for the South Shore. So like I said, most of our comments are going to be focusing on traffic impacts, specifically how SQA and MARTIS relate to increase of VMTs to the area plan. There is a cumulative impact analysis section in this draft environmental review that touches on the subject. However, we have hired a traffic expert to really look at this for us to not only understand the impacts to the North Shore, but the overall impacts to the VMT threshold and what it means for TRPA planning. We're hoping he'll be able to bring some mitigation solutions. There was a robust discussion at the TRPA RPIC meeting yesterday that Mr. Sevenson's a part of on really thinking outside of the box in terms of mitigation for traffic impacts, specifically for SR 28 by Grove Street and what to do. So we're hoping to be able to continue to think outside of the box and bring some solutions to the table. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you guys next month.
Thank you.
Sam?
Good morning. Sam Rudnick from Tahoe Sierra Recreation. I want to thank you guys for being here. This is one of the only venues where we feel we get heard. I want to start out with the easement because I only have 3 minutes. I hope you guys are aware that we own that property, that we pay taxes on that property, that we maintain that property, and we are liable for that property. We are insured. I've never seen an easement be included in a project boundary where it appears that they can use that, for this project, which is not true. The PUD has an easement through our driveway. There's private residences that have an easement through our property. There's utilities that go through that property. And we're going to give more easements as we develop. There's none of those easements are exclusive. The power company has to raise the power from underground to above ground for their transformers. They want an easement. I don't know how we're going to fit all these in our little driveway, but I can understand why Mr. Tuma would like to take our parking and use that for the main entrance to his project. We really need some clarification. The pictures of that project, they don't depict where the entrance really is. No one understands. People I talked to all thought the entrance was where it is now. No one thought he was going to use our driveway. Let's see, what else do we need? If you look at the project, which I've asked, TRPA, the county to come on site, let us share our concerns. You can't get out of that driveway on a busy day. What people do when they come out of the golf course and there's congestion, they go through 3 parking lots. They go through our property, they go through Bank of America, and they go through Save Mart so they can get to a light to make a turn. There's also the bus stop is right there. those people, the pedestrians are at risk coming in and out of there. I hope that we can realign the project and put the entrance where it needs to be. The shared parking, those of you who are at the TRPA meeting in South Shore, I think the fire marshal said it great. He says, if you believe that that's going to work, I'm going to sell you a bridge. They talked that there's going to be 200 parking places, this shared parking. It looks like 90% of it is going to be for the condo hotel. The golf course, people that use the golf course are very concerned. And it could just as easily be 400 spaces. What are they going to do with their boats and their RVs and these people? So anyway, I hope that you can help us with the confusion on how this is going to flow, where the entrance is. Just to finish up, we are all for development of that property. We just don't want to have it have a detrimental effect on us or our tenants in the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Ellie Waller, and then the next three are Robert White, Ed Svedson, and Terry Dyer.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again here in North Shore. I'll just give a brief statement, and I echo the League to Save Lake Tahoe. Shannon, I want you to know it was Shelley Aldine at the governing board that asked the applicant if the density of 56 units was acceptable. My concern with that is if it is not acceptable, why was it even put in as an alternative? And echo Mr. Rudnick, are we going to get another alternative? The draft EIR clearly does not identify a superior alternative either, so I'm not sure how the reviewers are supposed to compare the impacts if we don't have a superior alternative. I'll go back to my comments. I've sent you pages and pages. You will get more. There are a lot of inconsistencies. The Tahoe City Lodge numbers, again, a new one came up yesterday. Implementing ordinance technology conflicts, lack of definitions, stating that the TRPA definitions are going to be used where they don't exist in Chapter 90 of the TRPA Code and Ordinances, so there might be a regional plan update required for that, an amendment. I'm not asking for a recirculation of this document. I am asking that an addendum be provided showing all the corrections. Do a track change. Show us where these corrections were made. I took hours and hours and hours to identify page numbers and sections in my NOP comments in June 2015 and forward, and they still have not been corrected, so I don't think I'm out of line asking for an addendum. At the Regional Plan Implementation Committee in July 2015, I asked specifically for the staff, as you have asked us, to identify sections in the Regional Transportation Plan, the total maximum daily load, the Regional Plan documentation. Show us where you've tiered. Show us where you've met these requirements. I mean, it's upon us to read thousands of pages as it is. Having to go to these other documents is really difficult. I'm asking for the same in kind here. Assess the mixed-use overlay for the currently zoned recreation at the Tahoe City Lodge. If the overlay and the community plan boundary is not changed, this changes the dynamic of the hotel. There is a section in the EIR that says that they're asking for these extraordinary measures, even if the area plan is not approved. You have to ask yourselves, is a minimal restoration of 1.7 acres over the entire area plan worth all these extraordinary measures if the area plan is not approved? The Tahoe City Lodge is clearly too large for 1.4 acres. The entrance to the building should go through the property, not use this easement. If you can't fit it, then your reduction in units. I will close. I will close with requesting that we get in-kind response back. I mean, I spend hours on this. I send you pages and pages, and I appreciate that you have to read them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Robert White.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Robert White. I live in Tahoe City at Tahoe Marina Lakefront. And thanks for the opportunity to comment today. I just want to briefly comment on one item in the area plan and related to the EIR, and that's the alignment of the shared use path connecting Commons Beach with Fanny Bridge. There's one impact in particular that we found strikes everyone who walks this narrow lakefront property. The alignment shown would skirt our shoreline, exactly dividing the grass. You have to somewhat visualize this if you can. It exactly divides the grassy area, our grassy area, which is only a few feet wide in places, from the adjoining beach. Children run and play in this area between those two areas, just as they do at Commons Beach. If you think about Commons Beach and the shared use path alignment there, and the 1,600 people that use that path on a peak day, that path alignment is set above the play area, it's set above the grass area, it's set above the beach, keeping children and unsuspecting adults safe. On that basis alone, just the alignment of that that's shown in section 5.5 and the map in section 5.5 of the area plan, just the alignment on that basis alone, no one we've talked to thinks that that alignment makes any logical sense. There is simply no room for the path that's envisioned by the county unless it's located in the lake bed. We're not a huge mansion. We don't have 100 feet or even 50 feet between us and the lake in front of us. We're just 48 homes, 48 families who share a somewhat constrained recreational space. And that's a space that would be forever destroyed with a busy multi-use path, a path that would actually create a barrier between us and the lake. So the county we think the county needs to provide some senior level oversight, some senior level judgment, and some senior level guidance to get this back on track, so we can expeditiously get to a path alignment that everyone can live with, as opposed to a I win, you lose situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed?
Hello, my name is Ed Svensson. I own a property at 247 Westlake Boulevard, which you get to through an easement off of Highway 28, which is the proposed entrance to the Tahoe Lodge. My concerns are traffic and exactly, I don't really see how I'm going to continue to use my driveway the way it's proposed. Have we looked into that at all, or who do I address on that? It hasn't come up?
Well, staff is making notes of your comments.
Okay.
This is just an opportunity to comment, so we're taking down your comments.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Terry Dyer? I don't have a comment. Okay, so the next three, Sandy Evans Hall, I should say the last three on the list, Pat Davison and Cindy Gustafson. Sandy?
Not this old guy.
Hi, I often go by Sandy Evans Hall, particularly when I pass her office next to mine at the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. Sandy had to leave. She had a noon appointment. And so my name is, excuse me, Ron Trebus. It's always a pleasure to come, particularly to the Planning Commission, because Larry's on that, so I'm not the oldest in the room. The first thing I was not going to speak for the Resort Association, and just for clarity too, I do have my fingers on the knob of the Tahoe City Public Utility District, and that I'm on that board of directors. I was going to speak, and I will for a moment here, about a lot of us that have been involved in the planning of Tahoe City and the North Shore for many years. My first exposure was in 1967, and coming up now, I guess it's 39 years of community service and being involved with a lot of the people in the audience here, as well as many others. But then I wanted to first of all state that the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Board of Directors has and is committed to being entirely in favor of the high capability land transfer of the golf course, and as well as the deed restrictions that are going to be necessary, and support having them included in this whole analysis as we move forward with the area plan analysis, as well as what I referred to, I guess it was referred to as a opportunistic project, but the pilot program of the Tahoe City Lodge. As Wayne, you addressed this being a roadmap, perhaps the area plan, and I agree with you. As being a roadmap for our future, it is good to evaluate, I think, a project of this scope in context and concert with the area plan analysis, because it is a plan that is nearing the ready-to-go stage, and it gives us an opportunity to test the environmental statements for how the area plan will be used in other projects in the future, such as the one that Bob and Carol White talked about, and the need for more environmental work on that. So I think this one really tests the town center in infill development, the creation of walkability and bikeability community, the investment of lodging right into town on the North Shores, which has long been a proposal in many other plans, as well as near stores, availability of public transportation, and then the Lake Tahoe recreational and golf course opportunities to be used all in a one-stop setting. So our feeling is that the environmental documents do have a solid analysis, but we want to make sure that those interactions between the pilot project and the area plan are thoroughly analyzed within the two EIRs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pat Davison. I'm the Executive Director of the Contractors Association of Truckee Tahoe. We're the local regional nonprofit trade association composed of about 345 member companies, many of whom have employees who live or work in the Tahoe area. This association has been involved with affordable and workforce housing issues for many years. I do want to thank Placer County for being one of the funders of the Truckee North Tahoe Regional Housing Study. I sit on the technical advisory group with your representative, Kathy Donovan. We will be releasing that study soon. There will be a future housing demand estimate that will no doubt generate some intense community discussion about ways to solve our housing crisis. Called by various names, employee housing, workforce housing, housing for the missing middle, the need for moderate and to some extent above moderate housing is a high priority for our association. These households do not make enough money to buy a home at the median sales price. The lack of full-time rental properties also contributes to the severe shortage. It affects individuals, families, employers, the community, not to mention the environment, as we look at the commuting workforce. We have two main points in regards to the second units in the Tahoe Basin Area Plan text, and respectfully ask Placer County to include these in the environmental analysis of impacts for the preferred alternative. The first is that you include all residential parcels in the second unit program. Based on a GIS examination, Placer County tells us that only 10 residential parcels would not be eligible for the changes proposed. That prompts our association to ask you to include those 10 residential parcels in the environmental analysis. Fears of increased density should be counterbalanced with the gain to be achieved by putting a residential unit on an already disturbed parcel. Please note that Alternative 3 does include analysis of second units wherever residential use is allowed. The second is a little more substantial. That's not requiring a market rate allocation for a second unit that has a certain type of deed restriction, and that's a local occupancy or local employment deed restriction. We are strongly opposed to the use of a market rate allocation for all second units, so we want to see a distinction. We're suggesting that perhaps a TRPA bonus unit or a pool allocation be used instead if the owner of the second unit is willing to put that local occupancy or employment deed restriction in place. We think this is a great way to preserve the second unit and also not use a market rate allocation. Alternative 2 does include analysis of second units using TRPA bonus units if there is a TRPA certified housing program in place, and that is also part of Placer County's area plan proposal. Our suggestion may raise other environmental questions. How do you mix components from different alternatives? What about using bonus units outside town centers and metering or the pace of growth? We look forward to that discussion with Placer County and other stakeholders. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Cindy Gustafson. I'm General Manager of Tahoe City PUD, and thanks for this opportunity to say a few words. Tahoe City PUD does provide parks and recreation in addition to water and sewer services. So we'll be completing a technical review, but we've been very involved throughout this process of the last 4 to 5 years with your county staff and are confident in the policies and the general parameters of the area plan as it's put forward and the draft EIR-EIS. And I want to commend your staff for tremendous public outreach. Crystal has been at, and Steve and Paul have been at numerous meetings over these years, trying to work through very complex issues as we head on our way to a new area plan. I wanted to give you just a bit of a history lesson, if you don't mind, real quick. In 1863 was the first recorded map of Tahoe City. Very small parcels, subdivided obviously at a time when we didn't have the needs we have today or could foresee the issues or the technology or the transportation modes we have today. In 1917, the Tahoe City Golf Course was developed, and that is about 44 acres on the backside of all the urban area of downtown Tahoe City. So in 2012, the PUD entered into an agreement to purchase that property with Placer County and the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association and the Airport District. And that was done to meet multiple objectives. For the Tahoe City PUD, we were looking at continuing to provide a golf course and continue recreation expansion on that key piece of property. The county was looking at mobility issues as well as visitor services, visitor amenities, and the Resort Association. The Airport District was interested in an emergency helipad. So we're trying to combine meeting all of those objectives as well as allowing the commercial properties on the downtown to be able to meet some of the demands and the rigorous environmental regulations we have for them to redevelop by using portions of that property. So we feel very strongly that this is a great win-win for the public and private working together. Our board has agreed with the deed restricting the remaining properties of the golf course to recreational uses, and look forward to working through this process. One other note, there were numerous mentions about the easements, and I think it's critical we realize the first easement was given by the golf course to what became the Henriksen and now the Keela properties back in the 1950s. And then subsequently, 2 other parcels were split off from the golf course. The Rudnick's parcel in 1978, as well as Mr. Svensson's parcel in 1978. So those easements are also recorded through there. So it's a very complex area. Land use planning starting in 1853 through now is not an easy process to reverse and to address all these issues. But thank you for your time. Look forward to submitting our comments and getting this area plan through. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
No one on our list.
Yeah, I was going to open it up to anybody else who did not sign in. So if you just give us your name.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Alex Moralatis. I'm a hotel owner in Tahoe Vista, and I spent 9 years on the board of directors of the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association and Chamber of Commerce, and I was also on the Tahoe Vista plan team. And a couple of comments. First, I would echo the kudos to Steve and
Crystal.
They were both patient, articulate, and when necessary, tenacious to get us through the reviews and helped us understand a fairly complex process. So I think your staff did an outstanding job. I would specifically on the lodging that's being proposed, I'd like to applaud and acknowledge the degree of collaboration that has occurred to date to get such a well thought out, well vetted solution for economic vitality for the Tahoe Vista region, Tahoe City, region. I say that as a board member that in 2012 approved $2.5 million in transit occupancy tax to be I should say we recommended to the Board of Supervisors that $2.5 million be used to acquire the golf course to assist the utility district in that strategic acquisition to allow that asset to be available for public vetting and inclusion. As you've seen it presented today, at the end of that long journey, a very, very viable solution. So I just want to acknowledge that there's been so many stakeholders involved to get this lodging solution that's so desperately needed for Tahoe City's economic welfare to you and to the TRPA. And I encourage you to, you're getting a lot of excellent comment and feedback, which is all part of the important process, but the conclusion is a high degree of collaboration that will demonstrate public-private partnership, as we've all been talking about, and make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak that did not sign up? If not, we'll close the public comment period. Maybe one of the staff was going to do this later, but there are other opportunities for input before the deadline that's coming up. There's on August 11th, right here at this same facility, the Placer County North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council will be having their meeting, and it'll be at 6 o'clock in the evening. So those of your friends who can't come during the day will have an opportunity to come in the evening and make comment, just as was done today. And those comments will be recorded as they have been today, and will be certainly addressed by the staff as they finalize the EIR. So I appreciate the public making comments today, and I want to bring it back to the commission in case members, in case there's any comments that they would like to make before we close this out.
No, the only thing is that we might. Seems like two areas that got most comment today were the bike path and the easement access to the front, and those might bear further investigation as far as making it clear on how the easements and things work for us. That's all.
Yeah, because apparently that was quite a discussion yesterday as well at the TRPA. That issue came up, I believe. Did it?
What was the issue?
The bike, the path.
The bike path, yeah. It was spoken to, yeah.
Right. So.
And it's work in progress, so it's.
I think the issue was they don't want a specific say this is where it's going to be, that they want to leave that sort of open for future discussion.
This is a regional plan, and it's not specific. It's just potential ideas that people are putting out. And there's a great deal more to it than meets the eye, and so I won't go into that.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Richard, do you have any?
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to point out two things. First, related to the trail, I didn't mention this in my presentation, but any future implementation of that segment, that trail segment, would require its own analysis. So there would be a feasibility analysis in terms of the alignment of that trail, as well as further CEQA analysis.
And hearings.
Right. It would be its own standalone project that would be analyzed. Correct. And then in addition, I just wanted to point out that the comment period does end August 15th, so you can get comments in before 5 p.m. on August 15th. And you could submit them either to the county or TRPA, and we'll make sure that they get to the environmental consultant and will be responded to in the final document.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Crystal and Steve and the rest of the staff. Again, this has been a rather complicated, long journey, and appreciate all the efforts that you put into it. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and close the meeting out. And thank you again for everybody who attended and gave input for us today. Thank you.